Hey everyone, it's Sevy, and welcome to my Emilie guide where we'll be covering her kit and talents, constellations, best artifact and weapon builds, team synergies, gameplay tips, and more to better understand this perfume designer. Let's begin.
And you never know what can bloom.
Emilie is a Dendro polearm DPS whose kit heavily relies on the burning reaction to enhance her combat capabilities. With sustained Dendro and Pyro application over time, Emilie's teams allow her to contribute strong damage while also enabling some reaction templates that involve the Pyro burning aura. Let's see how her kit works. Emilie's normal attacks are a 4-hit combo. Unless you have her C6, these are only limited to physical damage though. For the most part, Emilie functions as an off-field DPS and Dendro applicator thanks to her Lumiduce case, but there are playstyles and teams that can see Emilie taking a more on-field role, which I'll discuss as well. But moving on to the core of her kit, using this skill creates the Lumiduce case that starts at level 1 and launches Dendro attacks every 1.5 seconds. By itself, the damage is low, but that's because Emilie needs the burning reaction to massively boost her damage output. When enemies are affected by burning, they will give off scents, which can be produced and collected by the case every 2 seconds. Quite a morbid process. Once the case collects 2 scents, it attains the level 2 state. If the case doesn't collect any scents for 8 seconds, it will revert to level 1, so you'll want to keep burning going to maintain a level 2 case. The difference between level 1 and level 2's total damage multipliers is pretty big, and the attack range is also larger, though the damage is practically single target, and enemies would have to be extremely close in order to get affected by its very small AoE. The attacks can only apply Dendro on each enemy every 2 seconds, which means it only applies every other attack tick, regardless if it's level 1 or level 2. Note as well that creating a case does not snapshot Emilie's stats, so if you lose or gain buffs while the case is active, like switching out of Bennett's Circle or activating someone else's team buff, Emilie's damage will also be affected in real time. In addition to the case's regular attacks, unlocking her Ascension 1 passive gives it an extra stronger damage instance. Whenever a level 2 case collects 2 cents, it will release a Clear Dew Cologne attack that deals AoE Dendro damage based on 600% of her attack. It's pretty easy to notice, as it's a noticeably larger separate damage and has no internal cooldown, so every hit will apply Dendro. This is not considered skill damage though, so it won't be buffed by skill damage bonuses. Furthermore, Emilie's Ascension 4 gives all her attacks a damage percent bonus buff on burning enemies based on her attack stat. The ratio is 15% damage bonus per 1000 attack, and it caps at 36% damage bonus, which requires 2400 attack. Given Emilie's innately high base attack plus polearms that give attack percent bonuses like the Missive Windspear or Deathmatch, 5 stars with high base attacks, max leveled artifacts, and pyro resonance depending on your team, it's easy to reach and exceed this 2400 goal. Her skill also has a cooldown of 14 seconds, but a 22-second duration, so it can have 100% uptime by refreshing it. However, if you recast her skill while the case is active, it will reposition to where she is, but it will also reset back to level 1, which misses out on a few of those higher damage ticks by needing to ramp up again. There is a way to maintain its level 2 state more consistently, which is via her burst. Casting Emilie's burst stows away any active case and creates a level 3 case on her current position. This level 3 case no longer collects scents, but just directly launches a continuous shower of Dendro attacks within a field for 2.8 seconds, and these ticks will naturally deal higher damage than her regular case and have a bigger AoE than her skill ticks. You can't create another case with her skill while this is active. Another notable effect is that if you cast her burst while the skill case is active, it will save the current case's level, and after her burst's duration ends, she will automatically resummon the case at that level and refresh its duration, which can help her maintain a level 2 case more conveniently. Emilie's burst only costs 50 energy with a 13.5 second cooldown, so if you're aiming to burst every rotation, her energy needs in most cases won't be very demanding, and you can aim for lower energy recharge. Technically, her burst isn't extremely essential to her functionality, as her skill's Lumiduce case is her primary damage source. Still, it's a good form of front-loaded damage that has has more AoE than her skill and an easy way to refresh and reposition the case. And with her exploration talent, when a Luminous case is on the field, all party members gain 85% pyro resistance against burning damage, so you're more well protected if ever you're accidentally burning too. When leveling her talents, prioritize her skill over her burst, then you generally don't need to level up her normal attacks. For her Ascension materials, Emilie uses the Legato Skull Embossed materials, Lakelight Lilies, and Mechanical Gears. For her talents, she wants the Order series, more Mechanical Gears, and the Silken Feather from the Arlecchino weekly boss. Emilie's kit at C0 is already cohesive and has strong damage potential, but in case you're interested in spending a bit more on her, let's see what her Constellations add. C1 gives a 20% damage increase to her skill and Ascension 1 passive hits, and more importantly, she can now generate an additional cent every 2.9 seconds, which equates to launching more of her A1 passive's high damage attacks. All in all, it's a very significant damage increase. C2 makes her skill, burst, and A1 passive hits decrease the enemy's Dendro resistance by 30% for 10 seconds. That's another increase to her personal damage, as it can practically function as a Deepwood Memories artifact set and allow you to not need to equip it anymore, especially when resistance reduction effects have diminishing returns when it reaches the negatives. If you're an Emilie simp, this should be your hard early stopping point unless you're going for C6. C3 increases her skill level by 3, C4 increases her burst duration by 2 seconds, and reduces the potential damage interval between opponents by 0.3 seconds, which can result in more hits per enemy. C5 increases her burst level by 3, and finally, C6 gives her crazier damage and on-fielding capabilities, as using her skill or burst now grants a temporary Dendro infusion for her normal and charged attacks, plus a big damage multiplier increase while they're infused. Additionally, those attacks can now generate cents to help front-load more of her A1 damage procs. The infusion disappears after 4 cents or 5 seconds and can be refreshed every 12 seconds. Now let's go over her build, starting with artifact stats. Emilie's standard build follows the conventional attack sans, Dendro damage goblet, and crit circlet main stats. And for substats, you also want crit and attack above all else. As for her ER recommendations, unless you're fighting a boss or are in a relatively energy-hungry scenario, you can generally get by with 110 to 140% ER to burst every rotation. On the other hand, it's also viable to worry less about getting ER stats and just burst every other rotation or when available. It's important to note that for Emilie, Elemental Mastery isn't actually valuable, which may sound strange as Dendro units have a reputation for favoring EM. But first, remember that Emilie's main damage isn't the burning reaction itself, but rather she deals high raw Dendro damage that scales on attack, crit, and damage percent against burning enemies. This raw damage is completely unaffected by EM. And even if you could increase her burning damage by adding EM, the gain is very small compared to adding more attack and crit stats. Sacrificing EM for attack, crit, and Dendro damage bonus is just not worth it. The main case of advocating for building more EM is in a very niche Burgeon build, but that will be discussed in a separate quick section later on. For now, we're more focused on her standard burning build. Then for her artifact sets, of course, she's a perfect user of the Unfinished Reverie, being her general best in slot as a burning focus set, no surprise. If you also need to farm the Whimsy set alongside it, then that's better farming efficiency, and at least both 2-piece sets give an attack bonus for 2-piece builds and attack scaling units. A quick note as well that since Reverie just needs a burning enemy to be present to give the damage bonus, which is expected in Emilie's standard teams, other teammates of hers can equip this too. Another noteworthy set is Deepwood Memories, which gives the holder a Dendro resistance shred effect by hitting enemies with skills or bursts, but it technically doesn't have to be Emilie herself or a Dendro unit holding it. Another teammate of any element that deals skill and burst damage over time will work, so there's the option to equip it on someone else. An ideal case would be putting Emilie on the Reverie, then another teammate on Deepwood, which maximizes her damage. However, many of Emilie's teams don't have a second Dendro unit, so in such teams, it would be on a non-Dendro skill or burst dependent unit. In that case, it's also better if the holder isn't really a significant damage dealer, like Toma with his burst shield, or a tank Dia with her skill field, rather than equipping it on a DPS, like Xiangling, that would end up significantly lowering their damage contribution. However, in the case that you'd just rather not bother making another unit hold a Deepwood set, then you can actually just choose between Reverie and Deepwood to equip an Emilie, and the difference is close enough that you can choose whichever has the best substats. Another 4-piece option is the Golden Troop to buff her skill damage as an off-field unit, but its potential is noticeably lower than Reverie and Deepwood since it doesn't buff her A1 and burst damage. As a flexible or temporary build, you can use 2-piece combos of Deepwood Memories, Golden Troop, and or any attack sets, and just choose pieces with the best stats. Next, let's take a look at Emilie's recommended weapon options. She mainly wants weapons that can give attack, crit, and relevant damage bonuses. We'll start with the 4-star free-to-play options, which are unfortunately rather limited. If you have the Missive Wind Spear, it's the top free recommendation for its attack substat and bonus. Make sure Emilie is on field first to trigger the bonus. It's a limited event weapon though, so newer players won't have it. The Blackcliff Pole is the next free-to-play alternative if you missed out on the Wind Spear and have none of the possible 4 or 5-star gacha options. However, it does cost Star Glitter to get, which could be used in wishes instead, so that's up to you. Note as well that passive isn't useful in pure single target fights like most bosses, and she has to be on field to trigger the passive buff. One more is the craftable Kitane Cross Spear. Its EM substat is largely wasted, but its passive can give her a lot of energy for burst recharging and a bit of skill damage bonus. Moving on to 4-star gacha or paid options, the Deathmatch is a good option, but it does require purchasing the Battle Pass. It's a high crit rate stat stick that helps a lot in fixing your crit ratio, with straightforward attack bonuses from its passive. A standard 4-star gacha option you likely have, or eventually will, is the Favonius Lance. It's on the lower side of personal damage, but it can address her energy needs very well, and it helps your entire team's energy needs and rotation smoothness with its particle generating effect. Then there are weapons with more specific conditions. If you have it, the Prospector's Drill has an attack substat and gives attack and damage bonus stacks. However, she needs to get healing triggers to stack its mechanic, which will be team specific and situational, and it is a limited banner gacha 4 stars, so it's going to be rare and not worth sniping just for her. Another is the Lithic Spear, which wants Lyra teammates to stack its bonus while also being a limited 4-star gacha pull. With 5 stars, there are a lot of options at least. Her best slot is of course the Lumidu's Elegy, which gives a lot of base attack and crit rate, plus attack and damage bonus passives, which are significant boosts to her. More so, it gives her a potent extra energy source to largely address her energy needs. The damage increase you get from her free-to-play weapons and even other 5 stars is really huge, ranging from 25 to 40+%. When it comes to her C1 versus R1, if you already have one of her better alternative 5-star pole arms, then the damage jump to her R1 signature will be a bit smaller or on par with going from C0 to C1. However, if you're stuck with one of her free-to-play options, then R1 overall has more benefits in terms of damage and energy, of course at the risk of more primos. But I want to make it very clear that you don't need her R1 or C1 to be a good damage dealer, so do not be pressured to get either. For follow-up alternatives, if you have them, there's the Calamity Queller and Staff of Homa as your next best limited weapon options. The Primordial Jadewing Spear is a standard 5-star that's also a good upgrade over 4 stars, though you want to ramp its buff stacks on field to maximize. Other limited 5 stars are generally also upgrades over her 4 stars, so if they're unused, you can put them on her instead. Finally, let's go over her team comps, synergies, and pointers. Again, you want to consistently refresh burning in order to unlock and maintain Emilie's full damage and Dendro application potential, so having a pyro source that reliably enables that will be important. Emilie can do most of her functions off-field, but she can also quick swap around or stay active to catch on-field buffs, giving her flexibility in terms of rotation and field times. Her first straightforward template is a burning focus team, which is very similar to Mono Pyro, using another pyro DPS who can be off-field like Xiangling or on-field like Arlecchino or Lini will make this team mix a lot of Dendro and Pyro damage simultaneously. Bennett is a very valuable support to heal and provide a huge attack buff for the on-field unit, though note that since Emilie does not snapshot, Bennett's buff uptime on her will largely vary depending on how much time you give her on-field. In some cases, it's good to give Emilie a more on-field presence, especially to maintain Bennett's buff on her. And if you have C6 Bennett, you can make Emilie's normal attacks deal more damage by infusing it with Pyro, and she can potentially benefit from Pyro-related buffs. You can add a VV Animo unit to shred Pyro resistance for your Pyro DPS, and infuse their Animo ability with Pyro too. Grouping enemies also helps set them up for Emilie's A1 and burst AoE damage. Geo can also be possible, as Geo application does not disrupt Pyro auras as much, such as Zhongli for shielding and shredding resistances. A variant of this is a Hyper Carry team template with Emilie as your primary DPS together with supports aimed at buffing her. With enough investment, Emilie herself can do enough damage to effectively carry the team. Furthermore, we can add in other high damage reactions to the mix. If you can maintain a consistent burning Pyro aura combined with a Hydro or Cryo DPS who will trigger Vaporize or Melt respectively on a burning enemy, that can be a Burn Vaporize or Burn Melt template. Applying Hydro on Pyro will trigger a forward Vaporize, but since Hydro consumes a Pyro aura very quickly, it'll also get rid of the Pyro or Burning aura more easily. As such, a very fast Hydro applicator applicator like Xingqiu can overwhelm the aura instead and prevent many vaporizes from triggering. So instead, we want slower hydro application. Farina is extremely good for this role, as her hydro application is slower but can deal big hits, especially Crabaletas, allowing for strong vaporized triggers over time. A C0 Yelan is also a good candidate, as her hydro application won't be too fast, though it'll be more single target oriented. On the other hand, Cryo and Burn Melt teams are generally easier to work with. Compared to Hydro, Cryo consumes the Pyro Aura much slower, so it's harder for Cryo to remove the Pyro Aura. As such, a Cryo DPS can more reliably trigger reverse melts on Pyro-affected enemies. Ganyu, Wriothesley, Rosaria, and Kaya have notable reverse melt playstyles, and Emilie can fit in their teams quite well. A somewhat niche template is a Quicken Burning team that ends up proccing combinations of Quicken, Burning, and Overload reactions. You would want a lot of Electro application on the team to keep up the Quicken aura in order to aggravate, so a combo of Chlorant and Fischl or Sino and Fischl would be ideal. As a result, the burning uptime won't be as high, but it should be periodically refreshed enough with a Pyro applicator for Emilie to maintain her level 2 case. This isn't necessarily one of Emilie's strongest team templates, but it's one way to play her with an Electro DPS while still getting the perks of burning for her damage. One more niche way to play her is making her a Burgeon trigger herself. This can be done by inserting a Hydro unit with persistent off-field application to periodically trigger Bloom to create Dendro cores, then using C6 Bennett to infuse Emilie with Pyro and make her normal attacks trigger Burgeon on those cores. You'll mix Burning and Bloom reactions on enemies, so she'll still deal her buff Dendro damage, but this time it'll get additional AoE damage from Burgeons. The build goals will also change, as you can start building more EM on her, though it doesn't necessarily have to be a full EM build, as her damage is still a mix of both her raw Dendro damage and Burgeon. If you're considering using her in a Nilou team or even a Quicken Focus team, she technically can work, if only to provide Dendro application off-field. However, she's not really a recommended option compared to others with more to offer, like those who can consolidate different roles, like with better application, damage, additional buffing utilities, and or team sustain. And since you will not be getting any burning from the team reactions, you will not trigger her Ascension passives or even her level 2 case, lowering her damage and making her application much more single target focused and slower. Basically, she's very far from her potential in such teams. Of course, these team suggestions are not exhaustive or definitive. Explore other team possibilities and see what others suggest to find out what works best for you. And that's it for this Emilie guide. I don't find her to be groundbreaking, but she's a solid damage dealer with a clearly defined role whose main interest value is filling in a niche that gives burn-oriented teams more chances to shine. But of course, there's room for growth in the future if we get more units that can slot in her best team templates. Let me know in the comments if you pulled or are pulling for her and what you think of her so far. If this video helped you out, don't forget to leave a like, subscribe to my channel if you haven't already, and I will see you all soon. Take care!